chat. What's going on? Welcome to the tribe. Welcome to the tribe. We all the way live. Welcome to the tribe. We all the way live. Welcome to the tribe. Welcome to the welcome to the tribe. We all the way live. Welcome to the tribe. We all the way live. Come in the room, tap the hearts. Let's get started. We all the way live. We been departed. It's Dr. Cheap the Sunflower on the mic. I'ma get you right. Yeah. We all the way live. The tribe. Now let me stop playing around. What's going on, tribe? OCO to my knee. We doing the sound check right now. Come in the room, tap those hearts. Grab your daily heart me. Alright, so as you can see from the title of the broadcast, well, before we get into that, I'm sending positive energy to you wherever you are tonight. Yeah. Welcome to the tribe. This podcast is about positivity, inspiration, and knowledge to keep you motivated and leveling up your life. Okay? Yes. So tonight we're gonna take it easy. I hope y'all been having a wonderful week. Let's see. My day was good. I can't even complain about it. I got up, went to the gym, did some laps in the pool. You know, just to feel invigorated for today. I didn't spend a dime today. You know, I was on my best behavior when it comes to that, and it's just been a nice, chill day. You know. But we're going to get into it. Last night, really, we had a long conversation. If you missed it, I really need to post the replay. Because we talked about, yesterday we talked about, I went really, but I've been seeing stuff. And I really didn't know what it was about. And I wanted to just get more information about it. So we had, did a little research, and I'm going to just share with you guys what we found about the world fairs. And just to recap from yesterday, because I feel like yesterday was super duper, enlightening. I'm always enlightened when I learn about history, when I learn the truth, and that's the important thing about the Hood to Hooded podcast. Is that we solely want to be built on telling the true history, regardless of how it make you feel, regardless of how you thought you knew history. We go dig and we get receipts, and receipts that you can't deny, and we just read the receipts for what it is, because a lot of times I feel like we've been programmed to just like turn the other cheek, like when you see stuff and really just, oh no, it wasn't really like that. No, it was really like that. It was really like that. So we got to take it for what it is and stop acting like we can't learn about ourselves and our history, and we have to continue to allow other people to tell our story. Can't keep allowing it. So even if you're the first one to wake up, get the knowledge, read, discover something new in your tribe, it's okay, You up against the masses. You up against the masses, and it's okay. Yesterday, We let's see where were we yesterday? Yesterday, I'm trying to see. We just talked about how Christianity was used as a weapon by Europe and the Vatican and the popes, and you know, throughout history to control indigenous nations around the world. We went from how Europeans only had 1/4 or 25%, 20 to 25% of the earth, and how they colonized much of the earth, and now they have about 90% of the earth. By using Christian law, seizing lands from papal bulls, from the Pope, and later on, the Bible, which was a list of random scattered documents, and they used that as a weapon to control the masses. So that's what we talked about yesterday. We also went into how time was the first method of control. You know, before colonizers took the land, language, children, stories, identity, etc., they took the time, because time controls the memory, the origin, the legitimacy, the identity, the continuity, the sovereignty. If they can make the world start at zero, then they can erase everything before then. That was the greatest trick of colonization, was convincing the world that the history was that of the colonizer, right? That was the trick. Now I need to just make sure my sound is good on. Hopefully we don't drop tonight, because my internet been real janky. It's snowing. It was snowing in New York, so you know it's been a little janky. So I do apologize. So before it cut off, if you watching anywhere else, because I do multi-stream. So if you watching on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, then come over to TikTok if it gets cut off, because my TikTok, for some reason, it stays on. Sometimes it'll drop the audience, but for the most part it stays on. So if it drops, follow me on TikTok, dr.chiefess_sunflower. Dr. Chiefess Sunflower is the TikTok name. Alright. So welcome in the room, guys. Tap those hearts. So, you know, before colonization, my whole question was like, what was time? I was trying to figure out, like, what would time be? What would the essence of life be? Which is kind of like a deep question in my eyes, right? And I discovered that our time as indigenous, autochthonous, Amerindian, copper-tone nations of Turtle Island, aka the West Indies, aka the mound builders, the Mississippians, who were erased in history and illegally reclassified from Amerindian to the Negro. America's the world's biggest secret, you know, which most people know. Well, I wouldn't say most people know. You know, the curtains are unfolding, we'll say. Some people know, some people still just like, what? No, everybody came from Africa, you know. Some people still have that colonized education, that closed mindset, where they have been listening to anthropologists who intentionally lied. Now, my collegiate years at Florida State University, a university which cosplays the Seminoles, might I add, I learned that later, you know, the Negro, supposedly races, which were really the American Indians. So at that college, I would say university, not college, I took a class in anthropology. This was well before I was enlightened about who I am, did my ancestry, and realized that my genealogy traces back to being indigenous to Turtle Island. This is the most shocking secret I could really have ever learned in my life, But back then, when I was just a college student, thinking that I was just black, as they call it, or the Negro, or the NIGGA, some might call it. Um, and I took the anthropology class. When you take these classes, these people are supposed to, like, really try to tell you what is true in history. Turtle Island is the name for the West Indies before colonization. Turtle Island is America. Tamerica. It's a word used by the Niji. Okay? So, the Niji, our history, was intentionally mistold so that colonization could control the tribes, the history, and the mind. Anthropologist. So let's look up what an anthropologist is. I know what an anthropologist is, but when we get into our topic about world affairs, we want to make sure we know fully what these words mean and how oppression and people who create oppression use the words, the sciences, to kind of like cosplay and make people believe things that weren't true. So anthropology is the scientific study of humanity that crosses biology and sociology, concerned with human behavior, human biology, cultures, societies, linguistics, in both the present and the past, including archaic humans. So that's anthropology. They're supposed to be the elite and the know-it-alls when it comes to telling the truth about history. Now, when you have a society of people, a government of people who build this whole lie to erase a certain people, and then they say they claim they're teaching anthropology, but they're teaching it in a way that disenfranchises indigenous nations. Is it really anthropology, or is it something else? Because if you're studying it to erase it, then what is it? I mean, we could just call it what it is. It's just straight up evil in my eyes. So that's what anthropology is. It's the study of history, the study of societies, cultures, biologies, how societies move. Okay? So, coming back from yesterday, we're going to continue on the conversation. We started with the first and second and third century, and we realized, okay, during those times, the Bible was not created. Time over, in order to control the people, there was polytheism at this time in Europe. The colonizers, they only controlled 20% of the earth, mostly the top part of Europe. Comes to Constantine, who creates the Edict of Milan, which he said Christianity is now legal, because before they made Christianity legal, it was illegal. So if you were a Christian, which came from the Ethiopians and the North African tribes, the real idea of this religion, because they had so many religions, we talked about that part. So once Constantine saw that this was a religion that some people were converting to, he said, okay, we're going to use this into politics and make this our politics. So they made Christianity legal. He hired bishops, paid them, made them tax exempt, all of these things. And then came Theodosius. I don't really know if I'm saying that right, but he came later, like 373 CE. He made Christianity a requirement, legal in the state. Then came the popes. Pope Leo, he was in the 400s CE. He's the one who started the language with the papal bulls, saying that, if you weren't a Christian, you could get your property seized. And then later came other popes who made the doctrine of discovery, all these different documents from the Vatican, from the Pope, from the Church that said, "Hey, if you weren't a Christian prince, then your land can be seized, you can be enslaved, you could be unalive, you could be all your property you don't own, we own it," because that was the Christian supremacy law back then, right? So we coming up into the time of Christopher Columbus. Going past that time a little bit, colonization is in America. There's Seminole Wars, slave patrols in the 1700s. They were institutionalized 100 years before the government. The government, I mean the first president, George Washington, 1789. George Washington, even though he was the first president of the United States, he enslaved people, over 300 people, along with about 12 to 13 other presidents who enslaved people. These people were put on the money as a tactic to control the mind, and it was all funded by the Vatican, aka the Church, which agreed that, hey, if these people did not convert to Christianity, off with their fucking okay. Going on into the 1800s, you know, you got the slave codes, the Jim Crows, you got the land theft, you got all type of evil shit going on. They had the what was it? Eminent domain laws going into place where they could seize your land, put roads and highways. It didn't matter. You didn't have a say. They could buy your land. You couldn't say nothing about it. They brought in the Native Americans, you know, to pretend like they were the American Indians, put them on the reservations, and the American Indians refused to settle. And the nations that did create treaties, all the treaties were broken, you know. So then we get to, you know, after Emancipation Proclamation, when you're supposed to be free, then they made the slave codes where it was illegal to read, illegal to write, illegal to be unemployed, illegal to have gatherings with your tribe. It was illegal to not go to church. You had to go to church, and they had the slave patrol supervising the church, and the pastors could only teach certain things out of the Bible that they handed to you, that King James wrote specifically for enslaved people over here, but they took out the word slave and put the word servant. So then we get to the 1800s, on through that time. Now we into the 1900s. I'm just trying to review everything so we all on the same page about where we are with this topic of the world fairs, because the world fairs came so far later than everything that I just talked about. And I didn't really know much about the world fairs, but just judging from what I saw with the world fairs, it was just like a slap in the face from the American government, basically. Okay, they are the people who took the American Indians out of their time, out of their spirituality. Whenever you remove someone's spirituality, you control their religion, which we know the Pope wanted to do. They already said that we control the souls on earth. If you're not Christian, then you was nobody. The categories back then on the census was Christian, Jew, Indian, aka heathen. So we already know what led up to colonization and the world fairs. They took us off of the lunar calendar. They took us off of being in tune with nature. Okay? Reset the time and did really something that was detrimental. So let's go into the world fairs, when they happen, and how they tie into everything that I just mentioned. Let's go into it. Let's talk about it. Let's see. Where do I want to start? because it led me to deeper understanding of some things that I think is very important, that we must know as Niji, as melanated people here in Turtle Island. Where is my... So the world fairs basically was like propaganda for the government, basically. Oh, there we go. So let's get into it. The world fairs, and what they were, and how they impacted the indigenous melanated people. And it honestly tied everything together, because I was wondering, like, how, if they erased our identity, how did it spread so fast to the point where people started to believe that the narrative was really true, where Christianity started to be enforced by colonizers, and what was the thinking behind that? It's a deep topic, because most people are trapped into the mindset that this is something good, and the Pope is a good person, and the church is a good thing, and you know, when Constantine was putting this whole thing together in 313 CE, that he was thinking about positivity. But what I'm discovering is that it wasn't about nothing positive. It was all about control. As a former Christian goer, it's shocking evidence. It's very shocking, and it's just almost like psychotic, like, because people keep saying, oh, world fairs. I'm like, what the hell is the world fair? So I had to go and dig and do some research. So let's get into it. Let's not waste any time. So I wanted to know more about the world fairs that I keep hearing about, because when I hear it, people make it seem like, I don't know if there's like an older version of the world fair. Well, I'm sure there is, that was erased before colonizers got a hold of the idea. But I don't know. It's just a little weird. It's a little creepy to me, the world fairs. But let's see what it's all about. I wanted to know about the world fairs and how it impacted the indigenous nations, the melanated copper tone nations that were erased. I wanted to know what it was, when, and how it connected to the Mississippian mound builders in my tribe, the autochthonous in our land patents, our parents, etc. I wanted to know the world fair timeline, what was the reason, what it had to do with the development of money, royalties, and how colonizers got involved. Because I keep seeing world fair, which means that's my trigger to go and find out for myself. Now, you know, on the Hood to Hood podcast, I'm all about going and finding it out for yourself, because anybody can tell you anything, and I feel like that's the problem. We listen to so many people and we don't have our own opinion. We just sit and listen. It's called catechism. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Catechism. But that was something that they taught when they made us go to church, and they the pastor or the deacon had to get approved topics from the plantation owner, or from the master, or from the government to read. And they had the slave patrols there making sure that they wasn't trying to do anything else. This all comes from, the Pope, the church, the Vatican, all of these different places. So catechism, let's look up the word catechism and see if I'm saying it right, because that is what their whole thing is. And you may or may not have heard this word before, but this is what their version of religion teaches us without us really knowing that it's happening. Catechism. So let's see if I can get it to say it. Hold on.
Catechism.
Catechism. That's the word.
Catechism.
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 Say it with me. Catechism. This is what they're doing us.
Catechism. Catechism.
Catechism. CATE. Kism. CHISM. Cat. CAT like a cat. Cata. C-H-I-S-M. So I'm going to say it all together. C-A-T-E-C-H-I-S-M. Catechism.
Catechism.
Catechism. All right. So this word means doctrine, teaching, ideology, ethnic, dogma, rules. In Roman Catholic use, religious instructions in general. Catechism, a series of fixed questions, answers, and precepts used for instruction. Right? So catechism, the way I'm learning what it means, because I only started learning this by researching history and what the Roman Church was doing, means that when they were making the enslaved POWs go to church by force, because it was the law now, it was the law from Constantine in 313 CE. It's been the law since that time. Christianity. It was illegal not to be a Christian, is what I'm trying to say. Okay? So the whole thing was to teach us catechism. Say it with me again, guys. Catechism. I gotta say it again.
Catechism.
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 Okay? So this is basically giving you a set defined questions and the answers, and you cannot question it. That's why so many people are in the religion and they don't question it, because this teaches you fear of questioning it. It teaches you fear of researching anything outside of this. It's the same thing that was back then during the slave time, during the Jim Crow laws, during the, the black codes and all these different things. You had to read whatever was prescribed for you, and you could not learn anything that was not prescribed for you. So that's catechism. When you go to church, it's catechism, because you wouldn't question a bishop. You just have to trust and believe in the order that the Catholic Church set up. They set it up for it to be the bishop at the top, then the priest, then the deacon, and then the laity, which is the lesser people, which is what the church calls people who aren't the bishop. Laity. Let's look it up. These are all Roman words now. They come from, okay, they feel we need a guardian. So, so let's keep going. So what is the answer to the question I just asked? So the world fairs were like giant propaganda machines for the government. It was part carnival, part museum, and part stock exchange. Okay? The indigenous people were censored in them, but not in a way that honored the sovereignty. They were proof that the old world was dying, and the colonizers' new world, aka the New World Order, was the future. A lot of people think the New World Order is something that's going to happen in the future, but it's already here. Right? It's been here since Constantine in 313 in Europe. Okay? So what were the world fairs? They happened in the 1800s, in the early 1900s. Huge international expositions where nations show off their technology, their art, and their empire. Alright, so it's a way to kind of show what you got. You see the fairs now, how people come pull up, they show what they got. It's a little different now, but it makes sense where the fair idea came from. I never thought about it until now, where the fair came from. Right? So the modern cycle starts with the Great Exhibition in London in 1851. The Great Exhibition in London. That was the first World Fair. The Great Expedition in London. Okay? The Great Expedition in London. So the Great Expedition of the works of industry of all nations, also known as the Great Expedition or the Crystal Palace Expedition, was in 1851. It was an international expedition that took place in Hyde Park, London. Alright. Famous people other time attended the Great Expedition, including Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, Michael Faraday, and a whole bunch of other people. Okay, well, it's going into a lot right there, so we're going to skip about that. But that was the Great Expedition. That's what started the World's Fair. Then it spread to Paris, Philadelphia, Chicago, St. Louis, and other places. It was officially about the industry, progress, and civilization, civilizing the people and turning them into Christians, erasing the indigenous people identity, and putting out propaganda. That was the purpose of the World Fair. Unofficially, they were about flexing their colonial power. Yeah, displaying stolen resources, artifacts, and living people from colonized land as bragging rights. It's gonna get interesting. So a quick timeline where we focus on, the indigenous history, my history. We're gonna go into that because there was dozens more, but for right now, we're just gonna go into these few that were the main highlights, the most astonishing world fairs. So the one in Europe, that was the Great Expedition in London, 1851. Okay. Then in 1876, the Centennial Exposition happened in Philadelphia, right here in the United States. The Centennial Exposition in 1876 showcased the U.S. industrial power 100 years after independence. So 1776, they got free from the crown and all that type of stuff. And then 100 years later, they wanted to say, hey, we've been independent. They was bragging, the government. The indigenous presence at this fair was more than artifacts. And they also wanted to show that machines are the future. That was the purpose of the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition. Then 1889, there was the Paris Exposition Universal in France, one of the biggest world fairs to normalize human zoos. They would take indigenous people and turn them into human zoos. The native villages from colonized territories, the French people did this. They were displayed for European crowds, actual human people. The history goes so evil that it don't matter which way you research it, it's always going to come up to be something that is shocking. Like, it's just next in 1893 came the World's Columbian Exposition. We already know I don't fuck with Christopher Columbus and anything he got going on, but he was the direct descendants, and he copied everything from the Pope. He took orders from the Pope, from the Vatican, to seize any land that was not Christian and unalive, and enslave the people who were not Christian. So who were the enslaved people? The indigenous people? Oh, okay. I thought somebody said the American Indians was the Negro. Oh, okay. Anywho, the World Columbian Exposition was in Chicago. This was 1893, y'all, almost the 1900s. They were celebrating 400 years after Columbus. Celebrating 400 years after Columbus. It was the first American fair dedicated with an anthropology building. So this is why we looked up the word anthropology, so we can see it's the science of researching a culture, a people, society, things like that, like civilization. So they actually had at this fair in Chicago the anthropology building, which was probably stolen. I mean, I couldn't say probably, is where anthropologists displayed native people and cultures as archaic. The Midway and the American village, Indian village, they brought people to perform and pretend like they were the American Indians. So this is getting real tricky. I'm like, what's going on? Like, what y'all really trying to do? I'm like, huh? Then they had another fair in 1904. This is the one I hear a lot more about when I'm doing reading. is the Louisiana Purchase Exposition and the St. Louis World Fair. This way it get a little creepy because this was held at Forest Park in St. Louis in the city once called Mound City. Because of the Mississippian earthworks there, many mounds had already been destroyed, guys. All the mounds, pyramids, because America has more than any other place. This is all hidden because it's too empowering when you know who the people they try to hide and why they had to tell you that you was from someone else so they can disenfranchise you and not make you have any rights or laws. Okay, so the Louisiana Purchase Exposition and the St. Louis World Fair destroyed many mounds. So they destroyed all the mounds. They leveled it for city development and fair related expansion because the fairs were making them money because these evil people wanted to come and just think that they were at a human zoo. They actually had people on display. They could trick people into thinking certain people were into the fair. Part of that would be used for reservations. It said one of the places was the fair. Part of that would be used for reservations. It said one of the places was used for Philippine reservation. So after they went to the war with the Philippines, they brought some of those captives back and put them on some land over here and then added them into the Native Americans. Had someone from Africa there and said that all melanated people who were here was this African person. Yeah. This is where all of the propaganda really got its legs, guys. So the U.S. government back then for this World Fair spent $1.5 million just transporting 1,000 Filipinos to be displayed. And the last one we're going to mention is the Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco. This celebrated the Panama Canal and the Pacific Empire. So all of these fairs, when I went to study them, it's like it was just basically violent human zoos from the 1870s to the 1910s. So they use anthropology as a weapon, and to me that really fucked my mind up, because it's like, how could you use anthropology as a weapon and lie about history? But that's just the whole history of pilgrims and colonizers and the Pope, the Vatican. It's all about telling a lie to gain control. And it's so sad because it's not the hottest topic, but it is a topic that keeps us just lost, I could say. So why or how did they use anthropology as a weapon? So with the Chicago Fair in 1893 and the St. Louis Fair in 1904, the government spent big money and had anthropology budgets. The anthropologists and the government officials wanted to bring living evidence to all the fairgoers of who were the so-called Native Americans and who were the Africans. And they wanted to bring evidence that, this primitive way that they were saying is over with. They displayed Indian villages with teepees, longhouses, and pueblos. But see, the American Indians didn't live in teepees. We actually had advanced civilizations. So they used the Native Americans to take our spot and put it on display at the World Fair. The Native Americans performed rituals, war whoops, archery, canoeing, everything that we did as indigenous people here on Turtle Island. So it's often staged to exaggerate a backwardsness, right? Even though the people who were at the World Fair were farmers, ranchers, merchants, college-educated leaders back home. It's crazy that America had a human zoo. Period. It sounds so crazy. Like, it just sounds crazy. It says at the St. Louis Fair, they had anthropology days where indigenous men from different nations were made to compete in track and field and measure their physical and mental abilities compared to white Olympians. Yeah. So, who controlled the narrative at the World Fair? Because I keep hearing a lot of us talk about the World Fairs, and maybe I have to go deeper to see what was in place before these well-known human zoo fairs that they had to level the mounds and to still the land and just to create reservations. It was mostly designed by white officials, missionaries, which is church type people, anthropologists, and business interests. Indigenous people sometimes found a way to sell their stuff, but mostly it was just by these people who were about disempowering indigenous sovereignty and turning living nations into museum pieces and stealing their artifacts. Now, when it comes to the mound builders, the Mississippians, which is where my tribe was at, the St. Louis World Fair was in Mound City, near Cahokia Mounds. And they destroyed it all. It's sad. They really destroyed a lot of history. Like, that's crazy. And then they wanted to create this false narrative in the 1800s. Many white scholars and anthropologists and politicians told a lie that the mounds were built by acting like y'all don't know who did it when we right here, because they knew that the Native Americans didn't do it, but they wanted to erase us. So they had these fairs to help with the erasure process. These fairs allowed them to say that the real owners were gone and that the land was, nomad land, and it could be claimed by colonizers. The World Fairs reinforces by showing mounds but disenfranchising it from us because they wanted us to be fully African. And then saying that, oh, these are the Native Americans, they were here, but they were really Filipinos and people who were from Mongolia and Russia who were pretending like they were us, hence the name Pretendians. All right. So this is what I learned from the World Fairs. So if your people come from the Mississippian mound building territory taken without our consent, that's called spiritual violence, guys. They dug up these mounds, they dug up the ancient cities, they scattered the bones, they sold the artifacts. When the living descendants got nothing out of it. No recognition, no wealth, nothing. Alright? So the land that the fairs are on in the U.S. from the 1870s to the 1910s, it was claimed under earlier treaties and land cessions, which were often fraudulent and coerced. You can see that in the story of Sarah Rector, which was in the movie last week, but I don't know if it's still in the movies. But if you haven't seen Sarah Rector, that's what that movie is about. The government stealing land very, very fraudulently. Yes. Many of the city parks, the public land that you see in your areas, were carved out of indigenous territory, which was the whole freaking America. It's just sad. Like, so basically what is showing is that the first thing was to do some type of treaty with the indigenous people, which was always broken. Then they would survey the land, patent the land, make it a city, and then have a fair on the land, and erasing the indigenous people along the way. So where did the money come from these world fairs? That's another key question. The world fairs were financed by corporations, railroads, banks, state and federal governments, and ticket sales. Profits were from the visitors who came, the foods, the rides. So you can kind of see when you go to the fair now, that same kind of vibe has carried on till now. You know? And 9 times out of 10, this is copied from some indigenous technology conference. But they erase everything, or they have it hidden in the Vatican. They made money from licensing and advertising deals, and it would boost the railroads, the hotels, the real estate around the fairground. So the colonized and indigenous people were paid very little, or underpaid, controlled, and exploited with no share of the profit. They were stripped of their rights, their images, their performances, and sacred objects at these fairs. Singing, the royalties, they didn't get any royalties from the pictures, the postcards, the film that they put out from the fairs. All of the artifacts they collected, held, and monetized by the museums. That was the whole purpose of the fairs, was to strip us even more and to put it on display. These fairs raised cultural capital for universities and museums, so they were stealing the artifacts, right? The reputation for the anthropologists who were lying about history, but they got some type of prestigious reputation. It boosted the tourism and the development for cities, and it gave the government more propaganda. It sure did. And there's journals, receipts, photos, in the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, all over, that talks about these world fairs. Yes. So this wasn't a topic that I was initially interested in, but I see how it ties in everything at this later stage of colonization, knowing that it goes back to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century now. It just goes back really, really far. But these world fairs were the link between the Mississippian civilization and the tribes that carried the knowledge. So they kind of erased everything and changed the narrative. And it goes a little deep at how they did it, so it still may seem a little confusing, but it's just crazy. So the propaganda centers of the world fairs were to erase the truth of who the original nations were, replace autochthonous melanated Amerindians with imported Negro ideology, to think that you were imported Negro, to replace sovereign nations with racial categories, replace the Mississippian civilization with biblical savage to civilized stories, replace land ownership with land patents, replace our cosmology with Christianity, and replace our ethnic identity with African, to legalize the disposition of us from the land. So when you go and you say, yeah, I'm African American, they know, oh, you disposition from the land. We possess the land because you from Africa. You don't have no claims to this land because you're not Christian, first of all, and then you not even saying you from here, even though the records and the records from your genealogy, they show that a lot of us were inhabitants here. But most people won't even go and do it because they don't even know how to do the genealogy. We haven't been taught this. I was so happy to do my genealogy. It's like one of the moments that changed my life. So what would be the purpose of them to erase the copper tone nations here on Turtle Island? Why? Because you can't steal from a sovereign indigenous nation. But you can steal from a slave. You can steal from a freeman. You can steal from a Negro and an African. That was their thinking. So they had to erase us as sovereign indigenous people. Reclassification had to come first. So they presented indigenous people such as ourselves as vanishing. The land is up for grabs. They presented us as primitive. The mound cities, the astronomy, the agriculture, and our laws didn't matter anymore. And they showed the African and the American Indians at the same time. This is where the confusion was intentional, guys. It was intentional. And at these world fairs, this is the most important part. They had missionary presence at the world fairs, and this wasn't random. They were showing Christianity as a gift to heathen nations at the world fairs. Because Christianity is how they transferred jurisdiction. Under the Christian doctrine, the doctrine of discovery, non-Christians, again, had no legal title to land if you were a non-Christian. Christian nations were the rightful owners of everything they discovered, and this had nothing to do with you. It had everything to do with the Vatican and Constantine and the popes. That's what they're talking about. What they discover, meaning what they take possession of, to anybody who's indigenous to land. And if you're not Christian, which we weren't, then you can't have the land. But the gag is they still force the indigenous people to be in categories that weren't authentic to their DNA and their history, such as Negro, and they also forced them to be Christian because it was illegal not to be. So many people are like, well, no, I'm so deep in. It's because it was illegal not to be. You had to be. Back then, it was illegal. You couldn't even not have a job. You had to go to work. So making the Indian Negro, right? Check this out. Making the Indian Negro and making the Negro African wasn't about history. It was about property law. If we can make the Indian think that they're Negro and then make the Negro from Africa, oh, that's a property law move. 10 steps ahead of you. Right? We were POWs, not, we were enslaved but not slaves, Slavs. Most of the people labeled slaves on Turtle Island from the 1500s to the 1800s were war captives, political prisoners, indigenous rebels resisting foreign takeover, and members of sovereign nations refusing conversion or taxation, such as those Seminoles, the Appalachian Indians, the Creek, the Choctaw, refusing conversion and taxation. So they had to label them all just one category, a slave, because they weren't Christians. They weren't kidnapped Africans, not at the scale that they lie and tell you. They say Christopher Columbus discovered America, and that's a big lie. Colonizers renamed POWs as slaves. And they made laws to make these things. Even discovered that dark-skinned, melanated people, copper-toned people, came from Africa. And this made the lie stick in everybody's heads. It was propaganda at its finest. Alright? So imagine you go to the World Fair. We're going to put it all together now. Imagine you go to the World Fair, right? It's millions of visitors going to see millions of these Caucasians going to the World Fair to see indigenous people treated as specimens. You see an African village next to an Indian village with, Filipinos on it who they got pretending to be Indians. You have a mound builder artifact with no explanation. It's just, these people extinct. You have missionary schools there showing the before and after Christianity. You have anthropologists there because, they're the science of history. They should know the truth. You have them there showing skulls to prove racial inferiority. And you have the United States rising in glory over the graves of the First Nations. Okay? They wanted to say, hey, there was no black indigenous people here. They all came from Africa. The Indians died. This is white land now. Thanks for the heart, me. Right? So let's tell the truth about really what the world fairs were. Let's just tell the truth. We're going to sum it up in the one word. It was the Public Relations Department of Colonization. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They needed to do 3 steps. They needed to, number one, unalive or remove the name. So erase the name, erase the tribe, erase the mounds, erase the rivers, rename the people from Indian to Negro, from Negro to African, from African to slave, and from slave with no sovereignty. Right? And then they had to lock it in legally with the land pass, the census categories, the Christian jurisdiction, and colored codes. Meaning, once you were Negro, the government no longer owed you any treaty obligations because Negroes had no treaties. The American Indians had the treaties. hmm This is why, they couldn't call us POWs. Why? Because POWs are protected under international law. Slaves are not. hmm If it's so hard for you to believe why we are where we are and how we got here, it's a lot of trickery that happened well before we was even thought about. By reclassifying us as slaves, enslaving us instead of POWs, because we was at war, we was the victims of war, POWs. This is how colonizers, the government, avoids war crimes, reparations, invalidating land claims, unpaid labor for so long, for 400 years, intergenerational captivity, and taxing us without representation. So this is why our people were property and prisoners of war of a foreign corporation. It's sad. It's sad when you know the truth, like, with no sugarcoating. Like, let's just call it what it is. My ancestors weren't lost tribes. They weren't runaways. They weren't imported from Africa. Mm-mm. We were citizens of our own nations, pre-Columbian nations, with cities, roads, astronomy, agriculture, and our own governance. But they would never tell you that because it's too empowering. They want to keep you distracted, right? So the fairs, the world fairs, as we discovered, the churches, the census, the boarding schools, all of them were working together as a unit to erase the Mississippian identity, which I think they did a damn good job at erasing the Mississippian identity. I have no idea how this Mississippian identity keep popping up. Obviously the spirit didn't die. They could erase every mound, but the spirit didn't die. It was a lot done to make the tribes look lost, to disenfranchise us, to erase the spirit, to disempower the Neji, to make us feel less than, to feel alone and disconnected, and like we from a whole, how that feel to make someone feel like they from a whole nother continent when they land is right beneath their fucking feet. You know what type of psychological control and manipulation and the forward thinking about the future that colonizers had to do. They did this since Constantine. That's why I had to go back to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century to figure out how the hell they got the brave, evil audacity to do such things. But it makes sense now. It makes sense the more I uncovered things. I had to go and dig and do some digging into the world fairs because I was thinking like it was something that the American Indians created and did, and it was highlighting us. But when I dig deep, it's like, oh no, it was actually the opposite. So they did it to erase the copper tone indigenous sovereignty, rewrite our land story, break our treaty lineage, and make us believe we came from somewhere else. So if you believe you came from somewhere else and you haven't done your genealogy that shows you that you came from somewhere else, I'm not talking about the DNA. I'm talking about tracking your records. Then you're going to believe you came from somewhere else, call yourself something else. And as soon as you do that, you're disenfranchised. People like, what about reparations? Well, you're disenfranchised because you're saying you from Africa. And they feel like they don't owe you nothing because that's just what they did. You know, that was legal back then. The Pope said it was okay then. Okay? Because if you're saying you're African American, you don't have no land claim here. If you are indigenous, you have every land claim here. And the colonizer knows this. The native Pretendians knows this. Which is why they'll get in line and pay $5 to do that. Hell yeah, I'm going to get some free land. Hell yeah, let me take their spot, man. So what we're uncovering, guys, what we have uncovered tonight before I get off of here is legal fraud, religious fraud, anthropological fraud. The world fairs were tied to historical fraud, ethnographic fraud, census fraud, fairground propaganda, and identity laundering. So the next time you on a fairground, you might have to think like, damn, I'm actually feeding into something that was actually to erase my people. And I just know, like, the way society is now, a lot of people think about the now. I used to be the same way, just thinking about the now, trying to get into the hustle culture, trying to make everything, you know, we just got to work hard. We got to start at zero. But I realize now, damn, y'all got us starting at zero while y'all starting at 20 on stuff that was ours. That's backwards as hell. Like, what? It's backwards as hell. It's backwards as hell. It's backwards, guys. So I get on here just to ruffle a couple feathers, you know, keep us enlightened with history. History is not something that people like to talk about. I'm not a fan of history, but now that I know who I am, I have to be a fan of it, or at least engaging in it, because it keeps my mind sharp. So I'm not like sitting here thinking that the challenges that I face every day aren't generationally cursed and intentional by the government. It's not. It is intentional and set up for me to be a failure. It's set up for me to be disempowered, to be laughed at, to think I'm nothing, to think that I don't have nothing, to think that I can't control my own mind, to not feel sovereign. It's set up for me to feel like a Christian. It's set up for me to feel this way. Unfortunately, because I was rooting for history to be something else, but then when you go dig, you realize it's something that it's not. You thinking that it's gonna be like when you was in class in high school and they was lying to you, telling you that you was this, and then you turn out it's something that is not. That's embarrassing as fuck. First of all, for anthropologists to lie like that, that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to have a government built on all these lies. Like, every which way I turn, it's like lie here, lie there, lie everywhere. Wow, did you tell the truth about anything or no? It's like a no. I guess not. I guess not. Do your research. All people were not slaves at some point in history. No. Before there was pre-Columbian contact here on Turtle Island, we were not enslaved. We were sovereign. That's the whole word, sovereign. You feel like everybody came from Africa, so you feel like people were all enslaved. No. Even though everything is colonized now. But in history, no. That is no reason for you to say, oh, well, no. Just because I think that all people were in. No, that's not true. This is why we got to break down the facts and tell the truth. Christopher Columbus in his own journal said, when he pulled up in the West Indies, right? He said, wow, he'd never seen such beautiful people with so much fruit and land. And, you know, he didn't even know the names of the fruit. He just didn't know. He was just in shock. He said, they're so handsome. He called the people handsome. He did. They weren't enslaved. He said they don't know nothing about killing, murder, war. They don't know nothing about religion, the Bible. Christopher Columbus said these people are going to be easy to break their spirit and their soul. They wasn't no slave. I'm Irish and the Vikings enslaved my ancestors. Wow. The United States is not even 400 years old. Facts. That's what we just talked about. The United States was formed in 1789 with George Washington being the first president who enslaved people. We got to keep remembering that fact. They formed the government while the person who was the leader of the government enslaved people, and the people who followed him enslaved people. So it was built on a government that was all about having POWs. Oh, that's okay. It was all about having POWs. Then when they realized, oh, we can't call them that because, that ties them to the land. Somebody said, what a story you have. You're a da-da-da without a story. You should definitely not get on calling people that word. Because you got to go look up the word Neanderthal. Okay? Go look up that word and then you'll see that I'm not a Neanderthal. I'm trying to keep it PG for you. I'm going to keep it PG for you because I know how y'all like to try to get people live banned. It said it's freezing up, but I'm going to need you to go do some research. We're a little bit past calling people that word because we know all about the Neanderthals. I'm going to just let it stay there. Okay? We know all about Lucy now. Okay? So what's next? That's the thing about trolls, right? They'll come in and they act like you don't know history, but we passed that point. You got to catch up. I don't have Neanderthal in my DNA. No. Anything else you want to say that you think gonna ruffle my feathers? Because you will not get my live blocked. Because I could, pop off, but it ain't even worth it. You arguing with a Neanderthal who think that you the Neanderthal, it ain't even worth it. It's backwards as hell. This was we just talked about this. Didn't I just talk about this? Just talked about this. But anywho, guys, my time has expired here on the live. It said I'm freezing up. I know my live has been messing up all week. It's been dropping the live the whole time. My TikTok been dropping. But I just keep going and just, I don't know. Because I have a goal to go live an hour every day. So I just show up here and try to teach and try to hang out with the tribe. I don't see it coming about a Neanderthal. That wasn't nice, people. Yeah, well, somebody made a comment. They said, to me, this is what they said. I don't really want to even read it because I don't want to feed into I don't want to feed into it because it's just like it was on another app, so you probably don't see it on here, but it is from a multi-stream. So somebody on another stream said something what they think is gonna ruffle my feathers, but it's like I can't even read it because I don't want to give it no light because I know the truth. I know the truth. And they said something about yeah, I can't even read it. I'm not gonna even read it. Yeah, we already know that some people are nasty. They have no humanity skills, no kindness. They don't understand sovereignty. They don't understand that people were on lands before them. They just don't understand. You know what I mean? And they in the comments saying that white people gave us opportunity. You know that's delusional talk, because we already know we invented everything. We already know that part, so that don't work no more, buddy. Like, you gotta go do some more research. Sorry I missed the majority of this. We'll catch the full live next time. No problem, Chick D. Yeah, we don't feed into trolls. They just want a reaction. But they gotta go do a little research. You like, what? You think I wanna what? Are you serious? Don't make me pop off on you right now. I'm trying my best, but the last time I did that, then they want to go get you banned. So that's why you got to be on your P's and Q's. I'm sure you tried to put another word in there, but I have it blocked. It froze again. Dang. Yeah, I'm about to get off of here anyways. I can't argue with people who got bird brains. Can't do it. I mean, people who don't have any ounce of common sense can't do it. Alright. Good night, guys. This is Dr. Cheek the Sunflower. I will check y'all out on the next live. This is the Hood to Hooded podcast. I hope y'all stay positive. Don't let nobody with no negative ass vibes stop you from shining. Don't even pay them no attention. That hurts worse than anything. You know what I'm saying? You know the truth. You know who you are. People come in trying to tell you who you are. They know what side they on. They probably Christopher Columbus' grandson. Okay? So you don't pay them no attention. Yeah, that's just something to get you off of your marker. So they try to get you banned. They want to come and say everything in the live, but then as soon as you rebuttal, oh, they want to hit that button. Not today, sucker. Not today, Jack. The fuck? Why are we laughing at your racist pea brain? We laughing at you at this point. Like, racism is not the hot thing to be no more. Like, if you racist, it's like, ew. It's like, ew. Like, I know you think that's what it is right now, but that ain't what it is. I know your parents taught you that was what it is when you was at home. It was like, oh, every time you see a melanated copper tone person who covered in melanin, which is the defense system against the UV rays that protect us from getting cancer, that you're supposed to say something derogatory towards them, and them days is over. Like, grow up. We trying to teach you how to elevate a little higher. When you come into people's lives and stuff, you can say all of this, but when do you grow up past that? It's not cute. It's ugly. It's a nasty ass personality. We trying to teach your ass something. You need to show up more so you can learn how to properly act when you come into other people's space. You really need to learn how to shut the fuck up. Okay? Let me get off of here because, yeah, I gotta go. Bye.